You are listening to continuing coverage of the trial of Chad Daybell from True Crime Today and the Hidden Killers podcast. Let's go back to the courtroom.
I have no objection, Judge.
Okay, then 170A through U are also admitted. And again, counsel will ensure that on the record and the way they're entered, eventually the different sets are individually entered as exhibits. So those have all been admitted now.
Thank you, Your Honor. And I appreciate the court's patience in getting that clarified on the record. Agent Daniels, those pictures, were you able to look at those pictures as they were entered into evidence?
I was.
And do you recognize those pictures?
I do.
What are they?
Those are the photographs that our ERT photographers took while we were there on June 9th and 10th of 2020.
And did you work with other members of the FBI to create an interactive exhibit that detailed the work that you and your team did on the Daybell property on June 9th and 10th, 2020?
I did. I worked with our our Salt Lake City total station operator. I worked with our Salt Lake City Faro scanner operator, and I worked with the operational projects unit. That's our unit at the FBI laboratory in order to come up with an interactive.
And you mentioned total station. Can you just very briefly describe for the court and the jury what a total station is?
So total station is just a measuring device, and it's a point-to-point measuring device. Sits on a tripod on one end, and on the other end, it has a pole, and at the top of the pole, there's a prism. And on the end that's on top of the tripod, it shoots a laser to the end with the pole with the prism on top. And then that laser will shoot back to the tripod end. And like I said, it's really good for longer distances, and it's a point-to-point measuring tool. So the team can kind of dictate which pieces of evidence or objects it shoots in or measures. So in a scene like the one we'll discuss today, it's good at outdoor scenes. It's good at long distance measurements. It's good at measuring perimeters or grids. And we'll discuss that today later.
Is it fair to say, is it somewhat similar to a surveyor's tool?
Yes, it's similar to what you'll see road construction crews using on the side of a road when they're shooting in longer distance measurements.
And you mentioned a Faro scanner. If you just briefly describe for the court and the jury what a Faro scanner is.
And the Faro scanner is another measuring tool that we'll use on our crime scenes. And it also sits on a tripod, but there's just one measuring tool on the tripod, and it has a laser also, but the laser that it emits is directed by a mirror that spins on it, and it has a coverage area, horizontal coverage area of 360 degrees and a vertical area of 300 degrees. And as it rotates, it will shoot thousands, of measurements at a time. And we can't really, wherever we set that scanner, we can't really direct what it's picking up, but it's really good at scanning a lot of areas as it scans. And then we'll just move that around. And for this scene, we did just over 40 scans. So it's when they kind of complement each other. So it's really good using them on these scenes.
You talked about the total station and the Faro scanner. Is the data collected by that voluminous?
Yes.
Okay. And this exhibit that you worked to create, was it created to summarize the voluminous data you collected through photographs, total station, Faro scanner? Was it used to summarize that in a way that is presentable to a jury?
Yes. So there was a lot of data that was collected from all of these tools, and that all was presented to the defense and prosecution teams. And then this exhibit was meant to just summarize everything and make it as easy possible for everybody today.
And would that exhibit make it more convenient to provide your testimony rather than bringing in every Faro scan, every total station measurement?
Yes, it would.
Okay. Your Honor, based on Idaho Rule of Evidence 1006, the state would move to admit that demonstrative, or I am apologize, the summary exhibit 171 that the agent has just described.
All right. Has defense counsel been able to review the exhibit? Is
Yes, Judge.
there any objection to the admission of summary exhibit 171?
With the understanding, Judge, that it's being offered as a summary of this officer's testimony.
All right. Without objection, then, and pursuant to Rule of Evidence 1006, the exhibit is admitted.
Perfect. And Your Honor, may I publish?
Yes.
And just for the court's information, that exhibit is on a thumb drive.
Okay. So it'll be marked with the corresponding 171
Yes.
designation. Okay.
I believe I gave the court a courtesy copy earlier, and then this one will be presented into evidence.
Very well.
Agent, is this the exhibit you prepared?
Yes, it is.
It's just taking a second to read. Your Honor, I apologize. I appear to be having a small technical difficulty. I'm going to try and reboot this.
Okay.
All right. I think I have it going. Agent, can you describe to the jury what they're seeing right now?
So this opening screen just shows the city of Rexburg to the south, and then north is going to be to the top of our screen on all of these. And then our Daybell property, Chad Daybell property, is going to be up to the top here. And then I think the only thing else to mention is that on June 9th in the early morning, our ERT team staged at this Salem church as local law enforcement secured the Chad Daybell property prior to our arrival.
I apologize, Your Honor. It still seems to be having an issue. There we go. Or maybe not. Your Honor, I do apologize for the technical difficulty. I'm going to try and reboot this one more time. And if it doesn't work, we have an alternative way of presenting it through him.
Judge, could we approach this very so quickly? A sidebar.
I would prefer if Mr. Wood maybe continues working on that. Is there another prosecutor that can sidebar in his absence?
Yeah.
So your memory's not terrible. That's part. Why can I do with all of that? So and is stipulated. That does not only include stuff. That doesn't include Alex's garage law. It wasn't. You're one of those.
Your Honor, again, I apologize. We this last night, so
I understand.
the time, I don't know if we'd want to break for, I don't know if lunch would already be here. If it is, if we'd want to break for an early lunch and we can get this figured out.
If you think it's going to be some additional time, that's probably the best choice at this time.
Your Honor, that may be the best choice. And if we could have, I don't know if it's possible today to have a shortened lunch based on what the court had mentioned earlier.
Okay, let's try and do that. We'll break for lunch at this time. It's 12:45. I'd like to try to get back on with additional evidence at 12:30 if possible for a 45-minute lunch recess. Hopefully that's enough time to get lunch to the jurors and allow everyone to take the necessary break. So we'll break now for the lunch recess and we'll resume back, hopefully starting back up at 12:30.
All right, please.
So. Thank you. Please be seated. All right, if we could have the jurors brought in, please.
All right, please. So, President Count for Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Please be seated. All right, we've concluded the lunch break. We're back on the record on CR 22-21-1623, State of Idaho versus Chad Guy Daybell. Agent Daniels is on the stand in direct examination. I'll remind the agent he's still under oath for his testimony. And Mr. Wood is continuing with direct and had an exhibit you were working on that I understand is functioning now. Is that right?
Yes, and I thank the court for your patience.
Okay, thank you. If you want to go ahead and continue with direct, you may.
All right, if I may publish through the HDMI.
Yes.
Agent Daniels, you were in the process of just quickly describing what this picture shows.
On the bottom, it just shows the city of Rexburg, and it shows the Salem church where the ERT team staged the morning of June 9th, 2020, prior to the search warrant execution. And at the top, which is north, and it'll be north on all of the pictures that we show, it shows the Chad Daybell property.
And just to clarify, you were part of the search there on June 9th, correct?
Correct. I was the ERT senior team leader.
All right. Agent, I'm going to start with the house on the property. Can you describe what you see in this picture? And Your Honor, this is State's Exhibit 170 VV.
This is just an overall photo showing the front door of the residence, which is located on the west side of the property.
And can you explain what you saw in this picture and where it was taken?
This is just a vantage point photo, and it was taken on the second story level of the residence, which is right about there. And the picture is taken outside of this window, and it's just looking towards this large tree. And that's in the area of where we found J.J. Vallow's human remains. And then in that photo, you see a trailer there, and that's not typically there. That's a law enforcement trailer.
Okay. And where was this photo taken from?
This is another vantage point photo from that same window on the second story of the residence. And I'm pointing to it with my laser pointer. And it's just showing, we've just changed directions a little bit. So now it's showing some of the outbuildings. We call them outbuildings. So a chicken coop, another shed, and then there's a larger garage or barn in the background. And just past that garage is where we found Tylee Ryan's human remains. And then over to the right, I'm trying to point to it with my laser pointer, and this area is the area of where the fire pit was located. And then there's another law enforcement vehicle right here that typically isn't there. And with these vantage point photos, we're just trying to show the perspective. If you were a resident in the home, these are some of what you would see looking out of the home.
Judge, could I have a listing of what picture number that was last?
That was 170TT.
All right, thank you. And Mr. Wood, if you'll try to reference
Yes.
those each time, thank you.
And this next picture is 170WW. Agent, if you can tell us what you see and where that was taken from.
This is another ERT photograph, another vantage point photo from the residence, and it's looking through a kitchen window. And this time it's still pointing to the east part of the property. And this time you can see kind of that area of that large garage or barn. Eventually we'll see better pictures of that barn, but this is the area where there's a large garage door, so the entryway to that barn. And then on what ends up being the southeast corner of that garage or barn, there's kind of a man door. So from this photo, you can see the entryways to that large garage. And then past that garage again was where we end up locating Tylee Ryan's burial site. And then just to the right is the area of the fire pit.
And Your Honor, this photo is 170SS. If you can just briefly describe where that was taken from and what you see.
This is another ERT photo, and it was taken from one of the bedrooms on the southeast portion of the residence. And it's another vantage point photograph. And as you look to the east of the property, again, you can see the outbuildings, the entrances to those outbuildings. You can see the entrance to the garage. There's a garage door in this area where I'm pointing. And then there's a man door. Can't really see it, but it's in the southeast corner of that garage or barn. And then you can see the top part of the large tree. And in at the base of that tree in that area is where we found J.J. Vallow's remains. And then just past the large garage is where we found Tylee Ryan's remains. And just in this area is where the fire pit's located.
And Your Honor, I misspoke. That was picture 170XX.
Okay.
And Agent, you testified earlier about how when you got there, you picked out some areas of interest. Can you, with your pointer, show the jury where those areas were?
Prior to arriving from our aerial images that we saw, like satellite imagery, this was the area of the fire pit. So we knew that was a priority area. We were going to look for Pet Cemetery, which we didn't know where it was on the property yet. And then we had some telephone ping information. One of those pings was in the area up here where I'm trying kind of circling. JJ's human remains end up being found where that orange rectangle is. And our pet cemetery ends up being found in this area right here. And that square ends up being Tylee's burial site. But at the time, prior to arrival, we didn't know that was going to be exactly that was going to be Tylee's burial site. We didn't know exactly that was going to be JJ's burial site.
I'm going to click on this fire pit area and click on show measurements. Can you explain for the jury what those measurements are?
So initially when we arrived, we had 2 team members that were designated to go to the known fire pit and start assessing what are we dealing with on June 9th. And so part of that assessment, they started observing ash on the ground in the area of this fire pit. And they started setting up this grid. So this outer portion that I'm highlighting right now is the outer perimeter of the grid they set up. And the reason they did that was just because of the ash that they could see on that ground in the vicinity of the fire pit. And with the grids that they ended up setting up, they just kind of quadranted out. So they made a quadrant here, a quadrant there, one right here around the fire pit, and then the fire pit actually became a quadrant. So that was just an easy way for us to kind of designate and search each of those individual quadrants and search the fire pit, and we'll get into that in a minute. And it just, as we collect those items from each quadrant or grid, it's just an easy way for us to kind of document where things came from. And then in a minute, we'll show some photos of a charm that we located. And that's dot right there is where the approximate location of where we found a silver charm. And we didn't get an exact measurement to that charm, but with our total station measuring tool that I described earlier, we total stationed in all of these outer points, the perimeter and inner points, like just where these corners meet of this grid. And with our operational project unit was later able to take a measurement from that northeastern corner and then take a measurement. This fire pit ring ends up being center blocks. So at each end of each of the center blocks, we took a total station measurement. So from those measurements, we were able to get a precise measurement of that northeastern corner to one of the ends of our center blocks. And so that's the measurement you're seeing there, 33 feet, 1 inch. And so you get an approximate distance from the northeast corner to the fire pit ring. And so we're at least able to show you an approximate distance as to where that silver charm was located.
So, Agent, I'm going to click on these photos. And Your Honor, this photo is 170CCC. Can you explain for the jury what this vantage point is?
This is just an overall photograph showing an as-is photo. And in this photograph, once we were there, we could assess that this was an area, or I was able to assess that, hey, this is probably where our pet cemetery is. And I made that assessment based on there was a small dog statue right there at the bottom of that pole. And then in front of this dog statue, there were some discrepancies to the ground or some depressions. And so I was quickly able just to make a pretty decent sized square in this vicinity and get a team to start processing that area. And that's what we called our pet cemetery initially. And then in the background, you can kind of see where the fire pit area is back here. And so that's just an as-is photo showing what that looked like initially.
And this photo?
And this is just an example of that. The piece of the measuring equipment you see in the middle there, that's our Faro scanner. It just sits on a tripod. And then this fluorescent tape that you can see around on the ground, that's the team starting to create those grids that you can see over on the left side here. So the creation of the grids, and then you can see our Faro scanner starting to take scans of that area.
And Your Honor, that's States Exhibit 170FFF. And this is States Exhibit 170BBB as in Bravo. And Agent, can you describe what you see here?
And knowing that there was a fire pit and knowing that that could be a place where we could potentially find evidence, we processed this fire pit, and we wanted to show this photo just to talk about that a little bit. So this is an as-is photo of what this fire pit looked like when we arrived on June 9th. And the way we're going to process this fire pit is we're just going to process it layer by layer. And I'll probably say that a lot today, but we're going to process this layer by layer. We're going to take that initial top layer of tree branches out of there, look through it for evidence. And then eventually when we start getting to the soil and debris that's in the fire pit, we'll start processing that soil and debris. And we've got a particular way that we'll process that. We put a tarp down, and then we have sifters. So we have wooden sifters. And within these sifters, we have wire mesh. And then on top of that tarp, we use 5-gallon buckets. And so eventually we'll get shovels and usually end up scooping out the different soil, the layers of soil into these 5-gallon buckets. And then it's a team effort. So the team members will start taking the soil to the sifters. And it's usually at least a 2-person operation. One person's required to operate the sifter. You kind of have to shake it back and forth. And at least one person has to pour the 5-gallon buckets of soil and debris into the sifter. And then you start watching to see what you're collecting. And then we'll start, if there's anything valuable that shows up, we'll start collecting that. So that's kind of a quick explanation of what that process is like. And that sifting process is done at the fire pit. Eventually, when we start identifying the burial sites, we do a sifting process at JJ's burial and at Tylee's burial. So that's a common sifting process that's done throughout this scene this day, or these days.
Your Honor, this is photo 170 AAA. And Agent, can you tell the jury what's going on in this photo?
And this is just, we're continuing that process I just described. So those tree branches are obviously gone. We're at a new layer. And then we're just continuing to go through these different layers. And that process I just described would be happening. And then as we're going through that soil and we're sifting the soil, we're going to start collecting evidence, and we'll start to see some photos of that in a minute of what we start collecting. And then this just is this closer to being finished processing the fire pit. You can see that we've finally taken a rake. You can see the different lines through the soil. So we've raked a lot of that final layer. We've removed even the center blocks. So we've kind of getting close to completion here, but that's what it looks like kind of when you're done. And then a lot of the outside grids, they most likely didn't have any sifting done in those outside grids, but this raking process was probably done on those harder surfaces, and usually just a visual inspection of the harder surfaces with some kind of raking tool is all that would be required to see if you can see any evidence.
All right. And Your Honor, that was photo 170ZZ. Detective, what is, and Your Honor, this is photo 170YY. Agent, what did you observe in this photo?
This is a Pura Vida chain that was collected from the fire pit. So from that sifting operation that we did, this is one of the important pieces of evidence that we collected. And so this is the type of things that you will find when you do those, sift through all of that soil and debris. And then other things that were collected from the fire pit were possible bone fragments, possible organic material. There was at least one possible fabric piece and a possible cloth piece. And I'm using possible because at the time we're doing this out there, a lot of the smaller things that we're finding in fire pits, we can't make the determination on scene. So for a lot of that stuff, we'll just collect that, and then later we'll send that to a laboratory to get determinations.
Judge, can I voir dire a native objection?
You'll have to wait till another question now, Mr. Pryor.
And Agent, what did you observe in this photo?
This is the silver charm that was collected, and it's the one that will reference back to this red dot in the measurement screen over here at the northeast area. And so,
Your Honor, just for the record, that's 170DDD as in Delta.
And as the team was setting up this grid, this was one of the first pieces of evidence that we collected on June 9th. As they were setting up this grid, they observed that silver charm just outside of our grid perimeter.
All right. And what is that photo of?
This is just a closer view of that charm in place on the ground.
Thank you, and Your Honor. That's 170GGG. And what do you observe in this photo?
This is the same charm in place. We've just placed a placard. And obviously, this is item number 1. So that was the first item collected.
And Your Honor, that's 170HHH. And this is 170III. And can you explain what you see there?
This is it. Now we've moved it. We've just put it on a piece of paper and with the same close-up photo with scale.
Okay. Your Honor, the court has States Exhibits 175 and 273. We'd ask that those be provided.
All right, we'll get those.
And then while they're getting that, if the state could be handed States Exhibit 6.
Submitted. What's that? Okay, we have 6. Did you also want 175 and 273?
Yes, those are 2 pieces of physical evidence that were brought in.
Oh, okay. And you want those brought in at this time?
If that's possible, Your Honor.
Yeah, we can do that. So we've got some physical evidence that's going to be brought in at this point. I'll
273.
ask the bailiff to please coordinate that.
Your Honor, I might inquire now. These next 2 items are smaller items. Do you want them placed on the table, or can they be given to Mr. Daniels on the stand?
Let's get them admitted first before they're handled, and then if they're smaller, I don't mind if the witness is able to handle them. You want to allow defense an opportunity to view those,
Yes.
and then we'll.
Marking them, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'll instruct the bailiff, please hand those to the witness at this time, and you can inquire in aid of admission if you wish, Mr. Wood.
Thank you. Agent, do you recognize what's been marked as States Exhibit 273?
Open these or?
Your Honor, may he open those to identify the, without showing to the jury, to identify the content?
Yeah, and we do have gloves up there if you'd like to wear those. I don't know if that matters to the state. And
I think he's wearing some.
okay, didn't see that. Thank you.
I recognize these.
What does it purport to be?
It's the Pura Vida chain and the silver charm.
Okay, and which one was marked as 273?
The Pura Vida chain.
Okay. Is that the same chain that was collected from Chad Daybell's residence on June 9th, 2020?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, I'd ask that States Exhibit 273 be entered into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection, Judge.
All right, without objection, then that was 273 is admitted.
And then can you identify States Exhibit 175?
Yes.
What does that purport to be?
It's the silver charm.
And is that the charm that you and your team recovered on June 9th, 2020?
Yes, it is.
You recognize it to be the same?
Yes, I do.
Your Honor, I'd ask that States Exhibit 175 be entered into evidence.
No objection, Judge.
Very well, 175 is also admitted.
And Your Honor, we'd like to show those to the jury. I don't know how the court would like that. We do have plastic baggies they can be placed into, so nobody's actually handling them. If you want the witness or the bailiff to show it to them.
You can do that either way, Mr. Wood, or you could also probably project an image of them with the Elmo.
Oh, that makes sense. Okay. And Your Honor, with the court's permission, I'll also mark these bags with the corresponding States Exhibit numbers.
Yes, you may do that.
And may I publish by the Elmo?
Yes.
Agent, can you describe what you found in States Exhibit 273?
This is the Pura Vida chain that was found inside the fire pit. And then on this end right here is where it says Pura Vida.
And was that actually in the fire pit?
That was in the fire pit. And then the team found that when we were conducting the sifting operation that I described.
Your Honor, for the record, I'm now publishing States Exhibit 175.
All right, 175 is being published.
And can you describe what you see there?
That's the silver charm. And that's the charm that was found in that northeast corner, just outside of our grid perimeter. and that was seen on our exhibit, indicated by that red dot over by the measurement area.
And Your Honor, for the record, I'm now publishing State's Exhibit 6. Agent, have you seen this image before?
I have
Do you know who that individual is?
Tylee Ryan.
Do you see her wearing any jewelry?
I do.
Does that jewelry resemble or look like the jewelry recovered from Chad Daybell's property?
It does.
Thank you. And Your Honor, if I can go back to the HDMI.
Okay.
Agent, I'm going to click on this area that's marked as Site 2. And what was Site 2?
Site 2 is the burial site for Tylee Ryan.
Your Honor, this is photo 170V. Agent, can you describe what the jury is seeing in this photograph?
This shows our initial pet cemetery site, and I'm kind of highlighting it with the pointer. And you can see the dog statue. This was the area that was right in front of the dog statue that I initially said was the pet cemetery. We ended up finding a dog remains in this area right in front of the statue, and then cat remains in this general area. And we processed that area initially by hand, kind of doing a layer by layer approach. Once those remains were removed, we utilized this backhoe. And the backhoe in this picture has started to go deeper in our initial excavation of the pet cemetery. And now the backhoe started to expand that initial site and go north on the property. And that's what we're seeing in this photo, is that expansion northward. And what we'll end up finding is Tylee Ryan's burial site will be in this just north of that initial pet cemetery area.
And Your Honor, I think at this point, you talked about turning off the
Publishing of these photos.
publishing of the photos to the public.
Okay.
This may be a good place.
Going forward here, there's going to be some more graphic imagery in these photos. I am advised, and for that reason, they'll be shown and published if requested to the jurors and the parties. However, the court's going to prohibit their introduction on the live stream or otherwise to members of the audience attending. So we'll get the monitors set up in order to continue to publish these photos going forward.
All right.
I don't know if we probably need to reseat some of the members of the public as well. So if everybody wants to just stand up and take a stand-up break for a moment, we'll get that arranged.
All rise, please. So, so folks, all seats are fair game at this point. We got to clear off from this side. So you can sit anywhere in this general area, even in that front row, right over there where it says reserve, just so we can accommodate everybody. And then once you are settled, you're welcome to sit down.
Okay, thanks everyone for accommodating that request. Are the jurors' monitors working? Okay, thank you. You can proceed, Mr. Wood.
Thank you. And Your Honor, this is photo 170W. Agent, can you describe what the jury is seeing in 17 or in this photo?
As the backhoe is expanding northward from the pet cemetery, this is one of two vertebrae that were identified. And at this time, we weren't able to determine if this was a human vertebrae. But the key thing was, at this point, we stopped and we had an anthropologist with us on scene, and we tried to make a determination if this was human or not. And while that determination was being attempted, I caught an odor of human remains decomposing. And so that leads us to stop utilizing the tractor, and we start processing this area by hand.
And Your Honor, this is photo 170X. Agent, can you describe what you see in this photo?
This photo was taken around that same time frame that the two vertebrae were uncovered by the tractor. And once we smelt that possible human remain decomposing, and we saw those potential vertebrae that could be human remains. These bricks that are in the top portion of that photo, those were so close to this area. And at the time, we don't know yet if these are human remains. But if that is human remains, those bricks are close enough to where this human remains could be, that we decided we wanted to keep those, or potentially keep those, as evidence. So this photo just shows kind of that initial, we may be onto something here. This photo just helps show that initial, our clue that we could be hitting human remains. And it's important to note that at this time, we had already found JJ's burial site. And when we get to JJ's burial site, he was covered with stones and cement blocks, or stones and cement. So we had an idea that it's possible her remains something could have been placed on top of her human remains too. And then in the middle of this photo,
Agent, if you could just one moment, I need to identify this photo for the court, 170Y. And what did you observe in this photo?
This is a photograph we took, and then it's important to note that I wish I could point to it, but in the middle of this photo, this is the other vertebrae that was discovered around this same time. So these were the two vertebrae that the anthropologist was trying to make that determination on, is this human or not? But again, at this time, we couldn't make that determination yet, but we decided to start using hand tools.
Agent, can you see the mouse from my computer screen?
Yes.
Is this
Yes.
what you were talking about?
Yep, that's what I'm talking about. Thank you.
And Your Honor, this is 170Z. Agent, what do you see in this photo?
In the very middle of that photo, there's a larger white piece of bone, and that area ends up being Tylee's burial site.
And Agent, I don't mean to interrupt you, but is this what you were speaking about?
Yes.
With my mouse, okay.
And then I wanted to take a second on this photo again, at this time, we couldn't tell, we weren't positive that these were human remains, but we were treating it like it could be, and we were going to start excavating. And I just wanted to take a second to how we process these scenes is we'll set a perimeter, and then we'll start processing layer by layer. So try to take layer by layer and excavate the site, just so that we can hopefully tell the story. If these are human remains, we want to know how they were buried.
Your Honor, this is photo 170AA. And Agent, what did you observe in this photograph?
And this is just a closer, now we've excavated that bone that we saw in the last one. So we're getting a little bit deeper around it. We haven't fully excavated it, but we're just getting deeper around it, trying to excavate it. So now you're starting to see flesh. You're starting to see some charred parts of it. And so the team's just attempting to make sense of what is this. It still doesn't have we can't associate or identify it with human yet. Our anthropologists can't say it's human yet. So we're just trying to excavate down. Can we get to it? Can we see more of it to try to make those determinations? And another thing just to note is that we have a variety of tools that we'll use to do these excavations. We have shovels, rakes, picks, typically when we're further away from the remains. As we get closer, we'll use smaller things. We have smaller shovels, rakes. We have wooden tools that we'll use. We like to use clay modeling tools. We like to use tongue depressors if we get closer to bone and flesh. So that's kind of the variety of tools that we'll use for these different scenes. But this is just that closer up view of what we were dealing with. But again, at the time, we couldn't make the determination that this was human remains. So we're just trying to get to what this is and excavate it.
There's more to come in the trial of Chad Daybell. Press subscribe so you don't miss any of our continuing coverage right here from True Crime Today and the Hidden Killers podcast.